this is a work thing. Whether or not it's fun, it's still a work thing. Sometimes church can be fun, but this is a work obligation.
And it is culture. What's the saying? Culture eats policy for breakfast.
If they say it to you, they'll say it about you.
Yeah. So this is how I want to honor my pastors. Or this could be like, I want to be in the inner circle so I could be above discipline, or no gossip, right? Like, welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. My name is Frank, and I am glad that you are here. The whole gang is here. I'm down in Safety Harbor, Florida. My name is Frank. Down up in Baltimore, Maryland, we got Jeffrey Simpson.
Hey, everybody.
Down in Sumter, South Carolina, with his best Mark Driscoll impersonation, we got Delmar Pete.
Howdy ho.
Howdy ho.
I was expecting who do you think you are, but that works.
Well, that works too. He does howdy ho.
All right. Here in the Practically Pastoring studio, we got Andrew Larson.
Greetings, salutations, one and all.
And Timothy Miller.
Greetings, salutations.
All right, we got a great show for you. And before we dive in, we are literally 2 weeks away, right, from the Practically Pastoring Conference. So excited! If you are local, man, reach out to one of us. If you are within Central Florida, we got a deal for you. Just connect with us. But we have friends coming from all over the country. People flying in over the next 2 weeks. It's going to be very exciting.
Some people are jogging. Some people are biking.
They're flying
Planes,
in.
trains,
Hey, Frank, can you mute your mic
automobiles.
when you cough?
I actually can't mute my mic. I don't have access to that.
Here, we can. You just have to
All right. Okay. And then, and so it's gonna be a great time for the conference. I hope to see you there, February 17th to the 19th, at beautiful, newly parking lot renovated Lakeview Church. All right, in Tarpon Springs, Florida.
Let's go.
So, also, we want to give a big shout out to our sponsor,
Muy
Church Merch.
grande.
Huge.
They have helped us make this conference the best conference we've ever done. And
We've only done two.
and it's better than the first one.
Okay.
So we want to give a huge shout out to Church Merch. If you need any church merch, church swag needs, check
Merch
out
for your
Church Merch.
church.
Go to the show notes for that link. They are great. Show them some love. All right. So we
Andrew,
have
do you get T-shirts for your counting team?
Will this ever go away, Jeffrey?
Absolutely not.
I am hurt.
You know what? They probably get lanyards,
for those
all
just-
of which you can get at Church Merch.
All right. So
Very hurtful.
let's dive into this first question found on Facebook. What do you do when invited by church members to social engagements that you don't have time for, but you don't want to pop to their balloon? Recently, a member invited all of the senior staff, lead pastor, executive pastor, worship pastor, discipleship pastor, over for a social evening. I think it was an attempt to lean into community. And I applaud that. What I want to say is you need your first line of community to be your small group, but I don't want to deflate their attempt to integrate with our community,
with our church community. What are your thoughts?
I mean, this is probably crazy, and you can hear me out on this, but how wild was that?
I couldn't hear it, but I'm assuming it was awesome based on
It was pretty great.
Jeff and Dale.
I'm thinking, what if you just said no? I know that that's like a crazy concept, but if you have the time, you could say yes. If they've been asking pretty persistently, this has happened to us before, and they're like, "Here's 17 dates." That's usually a cue of like, you know what? I could probably make one of those work. Like if we can plan this thing out far enough. If it's a last second thing and there's like this huge expectation on you, that's a little different. But I hope that your staff, and if you're part of the staff and you're not the lead, maybe if you are the lead, let them know that you're allowed to say no. That's huge because someone might feel the pressure to have to say yes to everything. But let them know they're allowed to say no. I don't have any issue with getting invited out. Sometimes my schedule opens up. Every now and then it's a last second invite. I didn't have anything on the calendar that night. My wife and I are free. We could go out and hang out. I'm okay with that. We got invited to the movies a couple of weeks ago. It didn't work out. And we said, rain check, we'll go another time. That didn't seem to be a huge deal to the member. I don't know. I could go either way here. I don't think we need to be sticklers on either side. I think if your schedule's busy, it's busy, and let them know. I don't know that I don't know if we have to tell them you're not allowed to ask me to hang out, and you're not allowed to like engage in social events because I'm not in your small group. I don't know that I draw a hard line there. I could be just way off base here, but I'm not that like, it's got to be this way or the other. If my schedule's open, it's a possibility. I have no issue saying no. So if I can't do it, I just don't do it. So.
I think that sometimes people in the church think, hey, this will be a real treat for the pastor, for the youth pastor, for the staff, whoever it is, when they don't realize that what they're creating is not a real treat, it's an obligation.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I think as a church culture, letting your staff know, like Tim said, hey, it's okay to say no, and letting people be friends with who they want to be friends with. If I get invited out with, hey, why don't you and all the people that you work with come over to my house? That's going to feel like a work thing, not a social thing. And I think it's well-intended congregants that would put someone in this situation. But I think the church leadership needs to step up and be like, hey, you don't need to feel obligated to say yes to that. And maybe there's some people that they mean so much to the church that you're going to say, do you know what? You're right. This does kind of feel like a work thing. So why don't you take an extra morning off next week? Or why don't you do whatever? Because this is something that is important to us as a church. There was a older couple at my previous church, and the church was a block away from the water, and they lived about a block away from the church right on the water. And they would do a fish fry for the church staff around Christmas every year, and they looked forward to it. The husband went fishing, weeks in advance to have enough fillets frozen to be able to fry them up for everybody. And it was something that they treasured. It was one of the highlights of their year. And we were told, hey, this is not a mandatory lunch, but this is something that'll mean a whole lot to these people. And so when I was like, oh, why am I, as a 29-year-old youth pastor, gonna go have lunch with a group of 80-year-olds? And then the associate pastor was like, no, this is a really big deal to them. When you think of it as a pastoral thing, well, then you kind of change your tune a little bit. But I think you need to recognize it for what it is, and hopefully your leadership or your direct report will. And if you're the senior pastor in this situation, maybe that's the conversation you have with people that work for you. Hey, I get it. If you don't want to come, that's fine. But if you do, why don't you sleep in for a morning next week and not come in till noon or whatever, if you are a church that has office hours that are strict? Because this is a work thing. Whether or not it's fun, it's still a work thing. Sometimes church can be fun, but this is a work obligation.
Whenever I get invited to a thing, that is another thing my wife has to stay home and watch 3 kids for. And it does create a little bit of work, and it does feel like work because I'm at a place, especially if it's like a Friday or a Saturday night. I would say that I would encourage this needs to trickle down from the top as a culture in your church, that the pastoral staff's not expected to go to everything, but I think the pastoral staff should be wise in what it goes to. I mean, I'm sure all of us have been invited to certain things where somebody just wants to be able to say the pastor came, if that makes sense. It's a weird clout thing because our signature is not worth anything, but some people, it means more than others. I have a guy in our church. He's from Liberia, and I've been meeting with him for 3 years, every single Wednesday, him and a couple other guys. And he said that I was the first pastor who ever sat down with him. And he was so beside himself that he has coffee with me every week. And for us, it's not a big deal. It is, but it carries a different weight to the people we're attending. So we need to pastorally consider who we're saying or who we're not. I also think, taking Tim's advice of just saying no, I think just saying no, but also if you want to give a why in there, that's not always a bad thing. I got invited to something. We had a big event at church last night, and several people asked my wife didn't come. And I just told them, I said, listen, she was house sitting for her parents all week last week during an ice storm, and she hasn't been home. And my wife needs her time. And I think running interference for the other pastors on staff is also a good thing. I've had people say, hey, should so-and-so get, I said, well, actually, they've had kind of a busy week. And that circles all the way back around. It needs to be a culture thing at your church. And if you're at a church where your culture is the pastor comes to everything, then I would say that that's a conversation with your deacons or elders first. And you bring them all the whys. I've heard it put before, and I don't remember who said it. One of y'all probably do, that your church leadership, your lay leadership are your shock absorbers for the pastor. And, in the sense of they can run interference with this a little bit. So that would be where I would start with my leadership. Then I would trickle down to culture. And then I would strategically determine, who I am and where I am going to go. And I would also factor that in your calendar. I will tell my wife hey, next month is this thing, and there's going to be a few nights where I may be out, but this is where I'm going to clear out my day. And also, if you're a pastor and you're in a season where you're having to do lots of visits, can I just encourage you, don't feel guilty going home halfway during the workday. If you're going to go out at night, go home. Go home halfway during the workday.
Or don't come in till later. So there's a couple different angles you could take on this. The first is, I would echo what Del kind of said. There are sometimes people in the church who want to feel like they're on the inner circle of the pastor. And so I think sometimes what that is, there's an attempt by some people to sort of change what they perceive to be the power dynamics at play, where they almost want to have a different relationship with you so that they don't feel like there's any chance of like discipline or accountability, because maybe their view of the pastor is that this is the person in charge. And so if I change the dynamic by being on their inner circle, that'll change. Some people want the tea. Some people want to get close to you so that they feel like you're more open with them about things that you probably shouldn't be sharing with them. So you have to kind of watch out for that. The other thing is, I don't think it's healthy to have a culture where the pastor is expected to be at every family gathering for a certain group of people. You got to watch out for cliquey stuff. Sometimes there's cliques within a church or families within a church that sort of have this expectation that we get first dibs on the pastor and his family for whatever reason, and that's kind of unhealthy. But here's the other angle of this. This person said, you're invited over to social engagement that you don't have time for. And my question would be, explore why don't you have time? Why don't you have like some buffer in your schedule, in your calendar? Are you saying yes to too many things that then leads you to not be able to ever say yes to people? And the reality is ministry is about people. So social engagements could also be a huge opportunity for discipleship. Maybe you need to, like we said, create some margin within your calendar so that, you don't feel like you have to be in the office for 10 hours a day, plus a social engagement, plus this other thing you're doing. You might need to, create margin. And also, depending on your family and what season of life you're in, there are seasons during the year where you're more busy than others. So for me, basically the spring and early summer, I'm incredibly busy because I coach high school baseball and my daughter is in softball, so she's about to kick up. And so that means my social engagement with things like dinners and stuff probably goes down a little bit in the spring. Also, it's Easter, which is, busier for the church. So I just know that in like the late summer, fall, I'm more open for hanging out with people and doing things. So I think you just have to know that and communicate that. And I just think, I would look at both sides of that. What's the motivation of people wanting to invite me over? It could be just social. What it could be, there could be some other more nefarious motivations too that they may not even be aware of. They may have those motivations and not even be able to articulate it. But then also I would just, keep track of how much you're saying yes to so that you have space in your calendar to be able to say yes to some social things. Because honestly, you need social time too. You do need to hang out with people and just it not be an official like meeting of the church or something. So I just think there's a lot of nuance that could go on in this question.
Don't you feel like this is like the aspect of pastoral ministry that because of sin, like it's what makes it so difficult, right? Like, this could be just a well-meaning person that wants to, like, in their love language, just wants to say, "Hey, I might not be able to even give a lot to the church or even serve, but I can cook a good meal, and so this is how I want to honor my pastors." Or this could be like, I want to be in the inner circle, so I could be above discipline or no gossip, right? Like, this is the part where it's like the shadow side of ministry, where it's like I hate the fact that we have to like even figure
We have
out.
to wonder.
Yeah, I have to navigate this. And this is why like so many pastors are so guarded with their relationships with the congregants. And to some degree they have to be. In some degree it's sad because you can have really beautiful relationship with congregants if it's built on trust and stuff like that. But I don't want to create a division between that. And this is all the more why I think we have practically pastoring, where you want to have relationships with other pastors to be able to navigate this and say, hey, can I run something by you? Every time I meet with this person, they're asking me questions about other people and I don't feel comfortable. Am I crazy, or is this person after something else? Or, hey, this person keeps asking me out to dinner. Tim and I were talking about how like there's some folks that want to suck all your time away and like they want to just, you literally won't have time to write a sermon and do other pastoral duties because you'll be on the phone or be getting meals with these specific people. And this the I don't know if this is sad or maybe it's just like a difficult part of the reality is because your sermons and your pastoral ministry is connecting so well with the people, like you might be the only kind of community and person that they feel connected with. And there's this like weird parasocial relationship that happens. And you're like, I don't know if I want to have a meal with you. And they're like, why wouldn't they want to have a meal with me? And it's just,
It can flip
it's
into
all-
codependency real fast.
yeah, it's so
where you
messy.
need them to need you. It can even flip into like text, like responding to text messages in a certain time period with some people. There's like
Yeah.
this weird social pressure. Well, you're the pastor. Why don't you respond to me? Well,
Yeah.
I've got 3 kids at home and I put my phone away.
Yeah.
Also,
Well-
you're kind of annoying.
Accurate.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, this person posted non-anonymously in our Facebook group, so I'm like grateful for their openness to kind of share this question. I hope this helped you a lot because this is tough. I mean, this is one of those messy things where it's like I'm new at Lakeview, and like I want to navigate these relationships well in the terms of like, you know, I don't want to be like the Tim replacement or be the person that like
Why
Tim,
not?
Tim
Dang,
never
already
had
going
enough
there?
time for me.
Jeez.
yeah,
But
no,
Fine with me.
Frank always has
No,
time
I don't
for
want to
me.
do that.
We
I don't
Preaches
wanna do
his
that.
first
People to be
sermon and
sent out
he's
with the plan.
replacing
This is gonna
Tim.
work out
Holy
great.
cow, dude.
I mean, Jeff. This is a real thing. Like, I'm one thing that I met with another pastor in Tampa about was like, when I plant my church, I was asking for wisdom, and he said the one thing you need to make sure is done, and this is done through clear communication, is making sure that your church plant doesn't feel like a church split, right? Like people are leaving Lakeview because maybe they have issues with Tim or an elder or whatever. And they're like, I'm going to go to Frank's church because it's the anti-Lakeview or whatever. And it's
And
like,
if I take him out to steak dinner, I'll be able to influence him.
There you
Like
go.
that for real.
That's a real
what this
thing.
that is what this kind
It
of thing could
depends
be.
on the price of the
Yeah.
steak. We'll see how it goes.
and I've already told Tim this is like, if
Fogo
I
de
even catch,
chao. You need
if I can catch wind that someone is wanting to join a church plant because they have an issue with the previous church, I'm going to straight up say, actually, being a part of this church plant is not where you need to be. Like, you need to like figure out this tension or whatever is going on. But like, I mean, I hate that this is like kind of why this question's important, because they don't talk about this in Bible college or seminary. They don't talk about these like dynamics of how people are trying to create like these like political positioning in the church by buying you meals and like, you know, getting coffee with you, or the codependency. It's a wild
it's
thing.
hard because they don't even know they're doing it sometimes.
Right.
They
That's-
don't
that's-
even know that they have that dysfunction. So it's super, super important for you to be like emotionally healthy so that you
Yeah.
can be that like emotionally healthy, non-anxious presence in
Right.
that room, because otherwise you'll play into all the weird dysfunctional codependency, like needs being met that they have, that they're using you to meet an emotional need that you actually can't meet, but
Yeah.
they think you can because it's your position. And sometimes if you go back in the history of the church, you'll see it's the same group of people who are always on the in with the pastor. And that's a red flag that like they're trying to meet a need because he has this position. And it's not about actually having a relationship with him as a person. It's hard though.
I got another angle just for this question that I think is not talked about enough. So if you are like a younger pastor, maybe it's your first few years in ministry, and you've been given an opportunity to whether it's preaching, or maybe you're like a youth pastor, an associate, or some sort of place where you are connecting with people, there's this temptation to say like, well, my lead pastor isn't doing this, so I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And it's giving you collateral with congregants to build almost this like dueling personalities within a church. And now people are like, people like me more because I'm giving them what you won't give them. And dude, that's toxic. And that's, I would argue that's
You're
demonic.
starting a coup. That's rebellion.
Yeah. And I would like, if you sense that in you, like, here's the quickest way you can feel that. When the youth pastor preaches once a year or twice a year, and then people come up to them afterwards and say, "Oh, I love your preaching more than the lead pastor." Squash that, like right where that is. Like squash, if at minimum, squash that in your soul, and then like if you can't squash that in real life, because it is not useful or helpful. And actually those type of statements are actually going to be a betrayal to you as much as it's a betrayal to the rest of the church.
Also,
So-
they will 100% do the same thing to you when the next
I
guy
was gonna
shows
say,
up.
if they say it to you, they'll say it about you.
Yeah. Anyways, I think Delmar said this, and I think it was a good transition to the next question. You were talking about, like, I think either Jeff or Delmar said, like, oh, the reason why they're not available is because they have a bunch of kids. Well, the next question's about kids, and I think it's
These
gonna
are
be a good
very
question.
connected questions.
Yeah. So, what policies or procedures do you have for pastors with multiple young children under 3 with whose wives serve on Sunday morning as well? Do your churches allow your pastors to be husbands and fathers first, or do they expect them to be present with the congregation and allow their wives to take the full brunt on Sunday morning? For example, do they expect you to be completely focused on shaking every hand and listening to every story and butterflying around to everyone instead of being allowed to give attention to your own kids? Now, let me say this. I've never heard the word butterflying like that before. That's kind of I kind of like that.
It makes sense. You're
Butterflying
fluttering around.
Yeah. I though I would
I
say,
just think of the Reading Rainbow.
yeah.
Butterfly in the sky. I can fly twice as
I never heard the
high.
term, but I knew exactly.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good word. It's a good word. So,
I butterfly.
Tim, you have 5 kids.
5 kids.
Andrew, you have
3,
3
not 4.
kids.
I was about to say, what happened?
You have 4.
Yesterday you had 4.
We had an accident. It's fine.
Oh, no.
Don't name names.
Jeff,
No,
Jeff-
we had an accident. That's why.
Like
the
you just
kids,
so
never mind.
nonchalant said 3. I'm like, he's joking. Oh, he's serious.
Jeff and Del, you guys have kids. But I mean, Jeff, does Amy serve in the church on Sundays?
Bro, Amy runs his church. What are you talking about?
Okay.
Bro,
Actually,
if every ministry I've ever had, if I left, people would be like, oh, man. But if Amy left, devastation. Like, she has way more relational capital than me. But yeah, she runs our children's ministry.
Yeah. And I know, like Tim, like you were telling me that, like, Stephanie was like, can I help you with baptism? Because you're a mess. Because there was like issues with baptisms and stuff. So
Any administrative help in baptisms, yes.
So yeah, I mean, I don't have any kids, but my wife is wanting to serve more at the church. But can you guys answer this question? Like, there's this common issue, especially in smaller churches, where, I mean, that's not true. In big churches is an issue too, where like the pastor's wife is expected to be like free staff, you know, and I always try to communicate and over communicate. My wife's only responsibility to this church is to be my wife. If she does anything else, that's icing on the cake for the church. But how do you feel like your church handles this issue, or what advice would you give this pastor about his wife and his family?
Frank, I agree with you. And we covered this when we were in the hiring process with our staff over the last 15 months. And I actually had to sit an elder down because he had said to one of our people interviewing, now just so you know, your wife's going to be in on this with you. And I did sit the elder down and I said, actually, in a sense, yes, the wife's here and present, but we are not hiring his wife. We're hiring him. And if she chooses to do anything to serve in any ministry, great. We'll support her in that way. If her ministry is to make sure the family is getting to church on time on a Sunday morning, great. Like that's what needs to happen. Early on in ministry, when I was in youth ministry,
That is a ministry in and of itself.
it's a huge ministry.
'Cause-
it's a huge ministry.
When dad leaves early, that
Yes.
means that mom's getting 4 kids. Got it right that time.
That's the correct number.
Out of bed and dressed and deodorized now that they're a little bit older and
And I would say it'd probably be fun to address this question again with our wives. So it's not just us speaking on their behalf. I would love to get their perspective on this as well. I can tell you early on in ministry, Stephanie was really my right hand. She did everything with me. We served alongside each other. She was a small group leader. And when we went from 2 to 3 kids and then to 4 and to finally 5, by the time we hit 3 kids, we realized right now is not the right season of life for her to be serving in youth ministry with me. We just didn't have the time or the capacity to do that. Plus try to figure out childcare on a weekly basis. So she bowed out of serving in a lot of areas. She's found other spots to serve, but I'll speak from my own experience. I don't know how you guys have been, but on Sunday mornings, Stephanie is a single mom and she knows that. We have talked through this. She understands that. I leave early. I am out of the house before anybody wakes up on a Sunday morning. So when it comes to our morning routine, usually I'm very involved. Breakfast, backpacks, all of those things, whatever I can do to help, I'm involved. But on Sunday mornings, I'm not. But they have me the rest of the week. Like that's the thing. Like a lot of dads, they don't get to help out Monday through Friday. I do get to help out Monday through Friday. So yes, on Sundays, Stephanie is a single mom and she has to get the kids to church, and it's a chore. They're not always on time. People have made not so kind comments before that were very hurtful. And that's unfortunate. And that is a casualty of war when it comes to ministry families. And we've had to work through different issues like that in the past.
Put them out of the church, Tim.
I was church discipline.
Kick them
but
out.
There's no expectation. Like there is no expectation on Stephanie to have to do anything that's not in her comfort zone. So hopefully you have that as well. But I want to be careful here because I understand that you do still want to be present on Sunday morning. But if your main job is the Sunday morning service, which as the lead pastor, that's part of my job. Yeah, I'm heavily focused on the congregation. And Steph usually gives me about 15 minutes after after the service before she sends the kids. So I know it's my time to go when my two youngest come and grab my leg. Like they'll wrap around my leg, like, Dad, we're hungry. And then I'll break away from my conversation. Like, yep, we're going to go eat as a family. And then I'll roll out. But she typically gives me that time and understands. But I try to make up for that. Like the rest of the week, I know I can be more present in my kids' lives than a lot of dads. But on Sunday mornings, yeah, I'm heavily focused in the congregation.
I think there needs to be an understanding that, yes, my wife is gifted, and yes, there are certain things that she can do to serve the church, but having her serve in that capacity means that I'm going to have to, and unless somebody else is going to like, hey, I will take your kids or I will do this. And my parents worship with us. My boys are getting older, so things are easier now. But there was a time where we had 4 kids, kindergarten and under, at church, and I was expected to do all kinds of things. And the answer there was, that's fine. I can do those things. You cannot ask my wife to do anything. The other side of that is that and this was at my previous church, because there were not a ton of the younger families at the later service, we kind of created a clubhouse in my office, and all of the young families would hang out in my office. And it was a big office. There were a couple of couches and a recliner and stuff. And so my office kind of became the de facto Sunday school room for the young parents in the church. And this is a place that, moms can take their shoes off. There's kids on the floor. There's Cheerios all over the place, because there was an understanding that, okay, if we're going to have a parent be expected to do things, we need to make allowances for the kids. And as my kids have gotten older, what that's turned into is now my office is still the clubhouse, but now it's the clubhouse for all of the adolescents in the church. So now while the parents, we do the big fellowship hall time after service. And so while the parents are sitting around drinking coffee and chit-chatting with one another, we'll have 7 or 8 kids playing Roblox or doing whatever in my office, because my office is seen as it's the place where my kids get to hang out. And since they get to hang out in there, they get to have their friends in there as well. So I think there needs to be something with the spouses in the church where, hey, if something is going to be asked of you, this is going to be given, like whether it's leeway for dad to step in or somebody else to step in. But there also needs to be privileges for the pastor's family, not like special treatment, but hey, because dad is on staff, because dad's a pastor, because dad's the youth pastor, we get to hang out and do things that other kids wouldn't get to do at the church. Sometimes that means like my kids got to have a birthday party in the fellowship hall. Well, I probably wouldn't do that for someone that's been coming for 3 or 4 months. My kids have a place where they can plug in their devices and charge them during church because dad has an office. So there are perks that I think the pastor's family should get, because we hear all these things about pastors' kids growing up and resenting the church. I would rather be a C- preacher whose kids grow up to love Jesus than be Spurgeon and have kids resent the church. So
Wow.
We need to do whatever we can do to make church as easy as possible for the pastors' families.
Yeah, he specifically asked what policies and procedures. We don't have any written policies or procedures. It's a very well understood thing that doesn't happen. I will say, if you're interviewing into a church, you need to state that up front. Listen, you want a bad version of me? Wear out my wife. You know what I'm saying? Make her feel like I'm never home. Obligate her to do things. My wife, there's no guilt or obligation. We had a thing at church last night, And she goes, okay, I'll be there right beforehand. And on Sundays, my wife knows she doesn't see me. I go in the morning, and I'm not home. I do not come home generally till 8 p.m. And she was like, okay, I'll be there at this time. And I just told her, I said, I know you. Nothing about this event jazzes with you. I think you should stay home and just let me come get the kids and you just stay home. And she needed that. And I think that it's okay to, like, if there are no policies, then guess what, Pastor? You're the policy maker. You're you fence the things she's required to go to. And one of the things, and I have had to work through this even in my marriage, is sometimes you can unstatedly make her feel like you want her there. Because sometimes as pastors, let's be honest, there's certain things I want my wife to go to, and sometimes she will, but sometimes there's things we want them to go to. They don't have to go to them. And I think it's okay to, like, suck it up and say, I'll handle this one on my own.
I'd rather she go to all the meetings I have to go to.
Yeah, honestly. Honestly, but seriously, that's just kind of where it's at. That goes back honestly to the conversation in the first half, and that is it's a culture thing. I do find one hack. I don't know if you want to call it that, but like that some pastors' wives do. My wife does serve in children's ministry, and it's a low commitment ministry because we have like once every 8-week rotation over there. But I'm able to be like, well, she's working in the kids ministry or doing something. If she's just not involved in anything at all, it's a little harder. Granted, she could. We also have members at our church. If you're here and you're a member of our church, you are expected to serve out of the gifting the Lord has given you. That's a blanket statement for every member of our congregation. So our wife should be serving. But if she has that place where she is serving, it's easier to say no to other things.
Yeah, I would just say my wife serves as children's ministry. She's never had the identity as being the pastor's wife. She's always had her own role. We've been on staff at churches multiple times, and she's always been the children's director, and I always had my role. So there was not that dynamic until we came here. Our dynamic on Sundays is a little strange because I lead worship and preach typically, and she's in charge of children's ministry. But it is a culture thing, and I have to brag on my church a little bit. My church does not have a culture where they expect my wife to do things just because she's the pastor's wife. All of her like expectations at this church are self-imposed, meaning like she felt called to children's ministry and started the children's ministry, and that was a huge asset to us because it didn't have one when I came, and so it needed it. And she's incredibly gifted administratively and as a teacher, and relationally she's probably more gifted. I definitely think she's more gifted than I am. And a big chunk of her ministry at our church is actually informal, unofficial relationships she has with some of the other women here in like a mentoring role that don't really feel like a mentoring role, but it is. And so on. So, I mean, yesterday we had our 3-year-old is having a discipline issue right now, and she was kind of out of control. And so my wife had to grab her up and take her home and bring her back a little bit later. And, just to brag on my church, it's full of basically extra aunts and uncles and a few grandmas and grandpas. And they are incredible with my kids. And I don't think my kids feel any kind of way about they're the pastor's kids. And I don't feel like there's any expectation from anybody that I have to like come and shake their hand before I pick up my 3-year-old or my 6-month-old that's with us right now and be a dad first. So, I hope you end up in a church like that. And it is culture. What's the saying? Culture eats policy for breakfast. You can have all the policies you want. I don't know if I said that quote right, but I think I did.
Sounds delicious.
You can have all the policies. Is it lunch? I don't remember.
It doesn't matter. It was a good.
Anyway,
we get it.
You can have all the policies you want, but if you have a culture of impossible expectations, people will find loopholes in your policy and figure out a way to impose those expectations on you and your wife. So, it's really about finding a church and hopefully creating a church that has the culture that says families are really important and our pastor is a husband and a father first.
That's good. Hey, this has been a great episode. Hopefully, our brother here will benefit from the answers that we gave. And if you want to submit a question, find us in our Facebook group, Practically Pastoring. Submit a question. It might be on next week's episode. And we'll be here next week. And the week after that, it's going to be conference time. We hope to see you at the Practically Pastoring Conference. With that being said, I'm Frank Gill.
I'm Jeff Simpson.
I'm Delmar Pete.
I'm Andrew Larson.
And I'm Timothy Miller.
This is Practically Pastoring. See ya.